Hi, this is a short video on how to implement a simple end-to-end XML to COBOl integration scenario in IBM Integration Bus version 9, formerly known as Webster Message Broker. In this video, we're going to create two message sets based off an existing XML schema in COBOl copybook. We're then going to implement a simple message flow that reads an XML input message from an MQ, maps that XML to a fixed length structure using a mapping node, and then outputs the message to another MQ output queue. We'll then deploy the message flow and run a test message through the interface. To get started, we're going to go to the IBM Integration Toolkit. The first things we need to do is create message sets that define our XML and COBOl structures. Please note we could also use message models in DFDL, but this example is leveraging message sets. We'll first start with our input XML structure and create a new message set by going to the File, New, and Other at the bottom of the screen. We'll then scroll down and select Message Set and click Next. We'll give this message set a name. We'll keep the project name the same and click Next. Since this is representing an XML message, we'll keep the defaults the same and then click Finish. You'll notice now under Independent Resources we have a sample XML message set. The next thing that we need to do is create our message definition file. To do this, we're going to expand our message set, go down to Message Definitions, right click, go to New, Other, and down to the message definition file from, because we're going to use our XML schema to create our message definition file. We're going to keep the XML schema file radio button selected at the top and click Next. We're going to select our message set that we just created, and we're going to select a file from outside our workspace on our local directory. We'll click Browse, we'll scroll down and select the schema file that we want to start with, and then click Next. Sample input is the root part of our message, so we'll select that and click Finish. That is all that we need to do to create our XML message set. Next, we'll create a new message set for our fixed length output message structure. We'll again go to File, New, and Other, scroll down, and select a new message set. We'll name this message set. We'll call it Sample COBOl. We'll keep the message set project name the same and click Next. In this case, we're going to select binary data because it's going to represent a fixed length message based on a COBOl copybook structure. We also need to include the XML document because this is a requirement for IBM Integration Bus version 9 to be able to deploy this message set to an execution group. We'll now click Next and click Finish to complete the creation of this message set. The next thing we need to do is create a message definition file based on our COBOl copybook that we have. We'll do that by going down into the sample COBOl message set, right-clicking on Message Definitions, select New, down to Other, and then again select Message Definition File From. This time, we're going to select the COBOl File radio button and click Next. We want to apply this to our newly created sample COBOl message set, and we're going to select our COBOl copybook from our file system and then select Next. We're going to select our root element of the COBOl copybook, hit the right arrow key to import that structure, and click Next. We're going to keep all the defaults on here, except we're going to select this checkbox for Create Default Values from Initial Values. This will ensure that we automatically apply default spacing for all of our elements, even when they do not exist in the XML message. This is an important step when creating this scenario. We'll now click Finish. Now that we have our message structures defined, we can now implement our XML to COBOl interface. To do this, we'll start by creating a new application. We'll select New at the top of the screen, and down by the Quick Start, start by creating an application. We'll name this application Sample Application and click Finish. We can then select New under this New Sample Application and begin creating our message flow for our XML to COBOl mapping. We'll name this message flow and click Finish. Before we get started with actually building out this message flow, we're going to select Sample Application, right-click it, and go down to Properties. We're then going to select Project References so that we could reference our COBOl and XML message sets so that we could use them within this message flow. Now we are ready to add the necessary nodes to build our flow. We'll start by first dragging an MQ input and output node. We'll do that by selecting Webster MQ, selecting MQ input node, and putting it onto our screen. We'll do the same thing for the MQ output node. We will then configure these nodes to use the appropriate queues. In our case, these queues are already defined. We're going to reference a sample XML input in queue and also a sample COBOl out queue. We'll do the same thing for the output queue. And again, renaming it so that we could see what the name of the queue is without clicking on properties. Next, we'll add a mapping node from the transformation section. To get there, we'll scroll down to transformation, select it, select the mapping node, and bring it into our screen. We'll name this node map XML to COBOl to give it a descriptive name of what we're going to accomplish in the mapping node. We then double-click this node so we can begin to configure our mapping. We'll keep all the defaults and select Next. We'll then expand sample application message sets, and for our input message structure, we'll select the sample XML message set and the sample input message. On the output side, we'll then expand sample application message sets, select our sample COBOl message set, and the sample output message. We can then click Next. We're going to keep our output domain as MRM, and here is where we could actually do our mappings from input to output message. Automatically, IBM Integration Bus assigns the output properties for our output message to make sure that it's in the COBOl copybook fixed length structure that we expect. This is all based on importing the COBOl copybook and generating our message set. Now, to map the message from XML to COBOl, we'll expand the tree structures representing our XML message first, and also our structure on the right for our COBOl output message that will ultimately make us a fixed length message. And now simply, we just need to drag and drop the elements. And that is all that we need to do for this simple mapping. Now that we have everything configured, we just need to wire together our nodes and deploy our application. To do that, we'll select the output terminal of the MQ input node. We'll drag it to the input terminal of our mapping node. We'll then select our output of that mapping node and drag it to our input of the MQ output node that we're going to put to. Now that we have our message flow wired, we have one additional step that we need to configure on this message flow. We need to select the MQ input node, select input message parsing, and tell it what the incoming message is going to be. In this case, it's an XML message, so we will select XML NS for XML messages down below. We'll click Save, and now the only thing that we need to do is deploy and test our application. To do this, we're going to simply drag the XML to COBOl message flow down to the execution group. We're going to confirm that we want to deploy the entire application, which simply in our case is just the XML to COBOl message flow. Now that the message flow is deployed, we're going to use RFHUtil to test our application. In RFHUtil, we're going to use a test file that we have created. Now that we open the file, we could go to the Data tab, select XML, and look at our input message. In our case, we had this pre-built. Now to send this message, we'll go back to the main tab and write it to the input queue. If our scenario was successful, we should expect a fixed length message on our sample COBOl out queue, which we will check now. As you can see, we read a message off the queue, and we'll go to the Data tab to verify its contents. We'll select character for the data format, and now we can see we have a fixed length message. We could also confirm that it matches our COBOl copybook by selecting COBOl, selecting a COBOl copybook that we use to create our message set from, and you can see that we appropriately parsed out the values for first name, last name, middle initial, and all the address and contact information as well. And that is all that you need to do to map from an XML to a fixed length structure. Thank you for watching our video on mapping XML to fixed-length structures in IBM Integration Bus version 9. Please visit us at www.transformatech.com, reach out to us at info@transformatech.com, or view our other videos.